Hi everyone, Amber here from Majestic. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are sewing up the Poppie. It is part of the Marathon Society, so there's going to be a whole bunch of videos today that show you a whole bunch of variations on the Poppie. This is from SewFlo Sewing patterns, so thank you so much, Brittany, for allowing us to feature your pattern. I will have all the information of where you can purchase the pattern as well as her social media in the description below. So this pattern is really full because there are 3 sizes available in the pouch version. I chose to make the medium. There is also a clutch version and a purse version. So today you're going to see it made a whole variety of ways. Like I said, I decided to sew up the medium. Normally on the Poppie Pouch, there's like an accent piece in the center here, like a half circle on each side. I had this quilted fabric that I had put together during a live from some remnants of a cotton cuts quilt. So I thought it would be really cool to leave off the accent piece and just make a quilted pouch. So in my version, I have the quilted exterior onto foam. I have the zipper done like in the pattern. And then on the inside, I chose to use a waterproof canvas. So this comes together very, very quickly. I think this would be a great pouch, especially if you do like markets or you sell online, or if you need to make a lot of something quickly. It really, really does come together very fast, and it is enjoyable to sew, and the pattern is really well written. So I hope you enjoy my tutorial. Make sure you check out the description. I will have links to the other sewists featuring their Poppie versions today. Thank you again to Brittany. And if you do enjoy it, I would love if you subscribe or give me a thumbs up. It does help my channel grow, and I appreciate it so much. Enjoy the tutorial. All right, so I am making the medium pouch. So I have my pieces laid out. I did not cut my exterior because I wanted to show you this first. I had some scrap fabrics left over from a quilt that I did. So I have just sewed them randomly. You can see on the back, I pressed the seams different ways. I did this on one of my Tuesday live sew-in chats, and I am a big fan of just like scrappy quilting. So that's exactly what this is. And it is going to be large enough that I can cut out 2 exterior pieces in the medium size. So I wanted to show you this beforehand, before I cut them. I did not put any interfacing on the back. It's just as if you were making like a quilt top. So I'm going to cut the pieces and then I will show you the rest. All right, so now I have cut my exterior. So I have 2 of these cut to the medium size, and there's no interfacing on the back. So what I'm going to do is I am going to actually quilt these pieces to foam. So I used the size small template and cut out the foam using that. So that way it's a little bit smaller, but it will leave that seam allowance around. And that way the foam is not going to be in my seam allowance, which makes it very thick, especially if you are on a domestic. Quilting it to the foam will kind of shrink the pieces a tiny bit, but I'm not worried about it too much. It should shrink it the same if I'm quilting the same amount. I also have my zipper tab that I cut out of the same exterior fabric. My zipper, this is the white with our sky blue teeth available in my shop. And this is our dolphin pole that we have available. This fabric here is actually called Sea Sisters. So it's kind of like a beachy theme. So I went with the dolphin. And then for lining, I have waterproof canvas. This is the gray Pro Tough from Walmart. It has the PVC plastic backing. So I am not putting any interfacing on the lining. Great. And as far as tools, I have plenty of clips. I am going to be using this Tex 35 silver thread from Wizardry Stitchery and using a 9014 Microtex needle. It's a little large for just quilting cotton, but because I'm quilting to the foam and then we'll be using the waterproof canvas, I like the larger needle. I have a walking foot that I'm going to see how it goes for the quilting. I have a water-soluble pen, a chalk marking pen, a seam ripper stiletto combo, a lighter to singe the edge of the zipper, some snips, a small ruler, and if there's any other tools that I use as we go along, I will let you know. All right, so step one, if you are making this with the accent piece, you are going to be adding that now. I did it without the accent piece because I just want mine to be all quilted. So my first step is I'm going to quilt this to the foam. So from the back side here, I'm just centering it. And like I said, I'm doing the medium pouch, but I cut out the small, I used the small template for the foam. And so you could use double-sided tape or whatever to kind of hold this on. Double-sided tape gums up my machine. So you could also pin it with like the quilting safety pins. I am just going to put a couple regular straight pins in just a few different spots to kind of hold it in place. It might shift a little bit. I'm not too worried about it. This will just make it easier for me to remove as I am going along and sewing. I like, for whatever reason, diagonal quilted lines, especially if it is like a random pattern. Like, you know, this is not like a patchwork where I can kind of line up all my seams. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the machine and just top stitch some quilting lines diagonal across using my walking foot. And you're going to see there's a little metal bar that I'm going to use to keep track of my lines. If you want, you could draw with like a water soluble pen or chalk pen your quilting lines ahead of time, and that way it'd be easier to follow. I'm just going to kind of do it all on the fly while I'm at the machine. All right, so I have my 2 exterior quilted pieces. I'm very happy with how they turned out. For the most part, they quilted really well. Give me a little bit of trouble just coming up onto where the foam is, but other than that, I think it's fine. This is how it looks on the back. So I'm really happy with them. I'm gonna set them to the side because now we're going to work with our zipper. The first thing that we're going to do is put on our zipper pull. So I just open mine up from one end and start, because I'm right-handed, on the right-hand side, put like a tooth or two in, and then insert on the left. And I always try to get it to balance. There we go. So that what I mean by that is like before I push all the way down, it kind of like sits on here flat. And then I can just gently press it and it should go right on. And so my zipper pull is facing to the left, like it's opening from left to right. So we are going to attach our tab on the right hand side. I cut mine a little bit bigger than what was recommended just because it's easier for me to work with. So you already see some stitching on the back, and that's because it was the quilted piece. And what we're going to do is on that side, again, you don't want the side where it, not where the zipper pull is pointing towards the other side. You are going to just line up your raw edge of your zipper tab with the edge of your zipper. And we're going to take it to the machine and we are going to stitch across at the given seam allowance. I'll probably stitch from this side just so I can see starting and stopping. Otherwise I'll be back stitching on the excess. And this, I cut mine bigger just because this is how I prefer when I fold them to center. So this is a little bit different way than how I normally do it, but I like this way because I feel like it's less likely for your tab to fall off. So I'm going to take that to the machine and then just stitch at the given seam allowance over here. All right, so I have just stitched across where the seam allowance. So now we're going to fold this tab to the back. So I'm folding it in half. I can find my center here. You could draw a line if you needed to. I'm just going to mostly eyeball it So where that center line would be, I can see a little bit of a crease. I'm folding this down, and then I'm wrapping it around to the back side. And it might, like for instance, this might go a little bit past underneath, like because I cut mine larger, but that's okay because you're not going to see it. So if it doesn't line up perfectly, you could either adjust it or just not worry about it too much. Underneath, as long as it's folded and not a raw edge, it's not going to be a problem. And so now I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to top stitch on this edge here. And just for extra security, I'm going to top stitch on the other long side. So I'm going to do 2 rows. You could just do the one, whatever your preference is. All right, so I just top stitched down the left and the right side. Mine is a little bit longer. I like that because sewing on a domestic, it gives me a little bit of a chance to start my stitches and not have to use a hump jumper. So that's why I leave mine longer. You could trim them now even with the zipper tape. I prefer to do that after I've already sewn the zipper tape in. So your next step is there is a measurement. You're going to measure from the end of your zipper tab up to the certain amount, and then you're going to mark in your seam allowances. And this is because that pull is closing towards this way, and if we don't do something on this end, it's going to go flying. So we're not putting a zipper tab. We're going to turn our zipper at a 90 degree. And I like this method because it allows the pouch to open wider than if you had a zipper tab. So you're going to open up your zipper past those marks, and you're going to bend it back on itself. So wrong side to wrong side. And you're going to bend it right at that mark. And then while you're holding the side, you are going to gently let those teeth come up to make a 90 degree turn. So on the back, there is going to be like a triangle here. This is my favorite way to do it. I don't like turning it as I'm sewing. Some people use that method. I don't ever get like a very clean turn. And so I prefer to do this method like it's written. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the machine and just stitch a couple basting stitches. What I like to do is, you can see there's a triangle. So if you go too far down, you might not catch it. I like to put this under my presser foot, put my needle down, making sure my needle is catching through that back. And then once the needle's down, then I put my presser foot down. And that's so this doesn't kind of like pop open on you as you're trying to put your foot on and move the clip out of the way, because you don't really have a lot of space to work with. So that's what works for me. I'm going to go baste this on this side, and you're going to repeat it for the left hand side. So I'm just going to prep both at the same time. So again, you're folding it back on itself and then gently letting those teeth come up for that 90 degree turn here. So I'm going to baste both sides at once, and this will make it so your pull cannot go flying off that edge. All right, so you can see that I have my zipper end turn. That pull will not be able to come off. Again, I don't trim these off until after I have sewed the zipper in. The other thing that I have done is fold my zipper tape in half, lining up the straight edge of the teeth and the tab, and marked my centers of the zipper. So now we're going to start putting our pouch together, and you're going to need your exterior. But before you do this, if you quilted, I laid mine on top to make sure that my exterior did not shrink. If there was like a big difference and you could see your lining around the edges, you would want to trim your lining down. But I didn't do like very heavy quilting, so it did not shrink that much. So on your exteriors, you want to mark your center. And I want my pouch, if you have a preference of like your front side or back side, since mine are both quilted panels, I don't have a preference. But if you have a print or something, you want to make sure whatever your front is, I want my pouch opening left to right. So that's just preference. So now I have my center marked, happens to be right where that seam meets up. We are going to take our zipper and put it teeth side down. So right side down, matching up your center, clipping it into place, and then slowly and carefully clipping around. And it's on the curve, so you definitely want to make sure that you are taking your time in lining this up. And you can see here where my tab is definitely a little bit wider. I want to just kind of feel where that zipper tape is and make sure the edge of the zipper tape would be lined up. I'm going to have some overhang of that tab. The other thing I always recommend is when you're clipping, move your pull out of the way, because if you look like this, there is a bubble here. It might not be easy to see on camera, but if you don't move your pull, just like it will warp when you're top stitching, it's the same thing when you're clipping. So if you are struggling with wavy zippers, that's one thing that you could be mindful of. So I always move my pull out of the way, even when I'm just clipping. And now once you have this clipped into place, so same thing on this side, you can clip it from here if you have the overhang that you didn't trim off. I'm going to make sure it's lined up with the edge of my zipper and clip that into place. So now I'm going to bring this to the machine. I'm going to switch to, well, actually I'm not going to switch to a zipper foot yet because I'm just basting this into place. So I'm starting at my zipper, basting along the edge and stopping at the end of my zipper tab here. All right, so I have just basted the zipper into place. So now we need to attach our lining. So I still have my exterior right side up, my zipper's basted on. Now I have my lining piece. This is the right side. I have marked the center. So I'm going to put this right sides together with my exterior. And so your zipper is going to be sandwiched in between. And so I had marked my center. So I'm going to line up my center first and then work my way out. And you're going to clip all the way to the end. Your lining and your exterior panels should match up. Again, I'm moving my pull out of the way when I'm clipping, so that way I'm making it less likely for my zipper to have or become wavy. And so now once you have this clipped, you're going to take it to your machine. Now I'm going to put my zipper foot on and I'm going to sew at the given seam allowance all the way across the top. I'm going to sew with the waterproof canvas facing down because when I sew with the PVC side up, it sticks to my presser foot. And I do not have a Teflon zipper foot. So that's something that you can think about. I'm going to put that towards the feed dogs. So again, I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch at the full seam allowance along the top. All right, so I have just stitched at the given seam allowance, so it's a little easier to see on this side since it doesn't have the basting stitch. So before I do anything, this is where I now cut off my zipper tab and where I've turned that zipper out. I just like to do this afterwards once it's caught in that seam. It makes me feel better that it's not going to get pulled out. All right, so now in the pattern, she has you open this up. So your exterior is right side up and your lining is right side up. And you can see there's kind of like a curve. You want to put your seam allowance towards your exterior side. And so she has you top stitch along the top, not through the lining. I am going to stitch through my lining because I find with this method that sometimes, especially if I'm using waterproof canvas, it kind of like pops up and then gets stuck in the zipper. So if you're going to do it like the pattern, this is what you're going to do. You're going to keep it open and stitch along the top stitching at about 1/8 inch all the way across. For me, I'm going to fold this back onto itself and make sure that I am kind of tugging it and pulling it down as tight as possible. I like to even like clip and make sure that that waterproof canvas is really pushed down as far as it can go. And I also monitor this while I'm top stitching. This is just my preference. So that means that I have my lining and my exterior wrong sides together. So I'm going to top stitch. The only thing that you need to remember, if you are top stitching through your lining, you want to start where your zipper teeth are and end where your zipper tab ends. If you go all the way to the edges and you're top stitching through your lining, that's where you get those funny puckered corners that don't pop out completely. So again, for me, I'm starting at the zipper teeth and stopping at the end of the zipper tab because I'm going through the lining. If you don't do that, you will have the funny looking edges. Or you could do it, like I said, how she does it in the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this side. Okay, so I have just top stitched, and just like when I was sewing, I moved my pole out of the way. You can see that I started here at the zipper teeth and then ended at the end of that zipper tab. And this is what it looks like from the back side. And I always just kind of like open my pole just to make sure that, like, test it, that it's not going to get stuck. So now you're going to repeat those same exact steps for the other exterior and lining side. I'm going to do that part off camera because it's the exact same method that I just walked you through. Okay, so I have just attached both sides. So you can see if I open it from the back, you want to double check your zipper pull, make sure that it opens, doesn't get stuck. And you want to open up your zipper 3/4 of the way. And now we are going to put our exterior right sides together, and then our linings will be right side together. And so we are going to start on the top here, and you want to push your zipper tabs and everything towards the lining side, and I'm matching up where the exterior meets the lining and clipping them first. And then so I'll do the same thing over here on this side. And once you have that clipped, then your exterior should match up fairly well. So I'm going to clip the rest of the side. Oh, I just broke that clip. Along the bottom of the exterior, you are going to sew this completely closed. We're going to leave our turning hole in the lining. So you can clip all the way across here. And then back on the other side. The foam makes it so it's kind of like poofing. So I'm just making sure that I am tugging it or lifting it a little bit so that I'm making sure that I actually catch both edges. Okay, and you're going to do the same for the lining. Sometimes it's easier for me to kind of like hold this up. And now your only difference is with your lining, we need to leave a turning hole. So if you would like to mark, she gives a measurement in the pattern that you can mark to remember to leave that turning hole. I just clip and try to remember, don't sew between the flips, which I've definitely accidentally sewn it up before. So definitely mark it if you need to. All right. So now we have it all clipped together. So starting on my lining, I'm going to start with the wider seam allowance she gives you and narrow it once I get to the exterior. And I'm going to do the same for both sides. I'm going to sew across the bottom exterior completely across at the given seam allowance. And then on the lining side, I'm going to do that wider seam allowance on the corners, leaving my turning hole here. So again, you want to make sure your zipper is open, otherwise you're going to have trouble turning. You are going to sew all the way around, making sure that you leave your turning hole. Make sure you're also paying attention to the seam allowances given. Okay, so I have sewed all the way around, closing up the bottom of the exterior. Here's the sides and leaving a turning hole in the lining. You can see where the seam allowance tapers in, and that's just so the larger seam allowance is on the lining and it will make the lining sit a little bit more snug. So now you can trim all the way around except for where the opening is in the bottom. You do not want to trim the seam allowance here. That's just because it will make it really tricky later on when we try to close that opening up. And with this tapering down, you should notice that your seam allowance, when you are sewing on the sides, you should not have caught the zipper or the zipper tab in your stitching. And that means that we will, when it gets turned out, it will look really nice. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. So once you have it trimmed down, we need to box our corners. So I prefer to just reach in and grab my corners. You can nest the seams. So whichever, like if this is my bottom seam here, I'm going to push that to the left. Like I'm going to match up the seam on the side, and I'm going to push my top seam to the left and my bottom seam to the right. And that should form a nice flat edge. Same thing over here. You might not need to reach up inside. Whatever way you are pressing your seam on the bottom here, you want to do the same for this side. So I pushed it to the right, so this one is also going to go to the right. Again, making sure that I have the seams matched up. Because I'm using cotton woven, it's not so bad if you don't nest the seams properly, but if you are using a thicker material, you definitely want to make sure that they're being pressed, this across is being pressed the same direction. And the other thing is you could also butterfly them open as well. That's an option too. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the lining. This will be a little bit easier to see because I'm not using the quilted material. That made it a little bit hard to be able to see where centers were. Okay, I do the same on this side. So when you tug it open, your seam should come to the center and match up. And so down here, you can see it's to the left. So I want to make sure that this one here is going to the left and the side one to the right. And then you're going to bring this to the machine and we are going to stitch across. And make sure you pay attention to the seam allowances. You're going to use a different one on your lining than you are the exterior. So I'm going to bring this to the machine and stitch across. So straight across all 4 corners. Alright, so now we have all 4 corners boxed. You might have noticed that I switched to a Teflon foot when I was boxing these. It just makes it easier. And so now I'm going to trim down, especially on the lining side, because there's just it's quite thick, the seam allowance. And you can also trim down on the exterior. I'm going to do that too, just not quite as much. All right, so now you're going to turn your bag. You should be able to just reach through the lining. Our zipper is open, so I just usually grab from the bottom, and I left a large enough turning hole that I'm not going to have any trouble. And especially because I'm using the cotton woven and the foam, it's very, very squishable. If you're using vinyl, you probably You might want to use a blow dryer or something to help it turn. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm reaching through and I'm just poking out all my corners. So that's one box corner. Here's the other on the exterior. And then this side here, that will pop open just fine because we don't have a tab. On the side with the zipper tab, I always make sure that I kind of push up to make sure that that popped open very, very nicely. I'm just trimming where there's a little thread tail. So now, if you want to just double check, you can look inside, make sure that your lining looks good and you're happy with it. And now our last step is we just have to seal up our lining. So you definitely want to make sure everything's poked out, because once you seal this up, it's going to be very difficult. So because we have sewed a little bit in on the left and the right from that opening, we should just be able to kind of, I like to put my pointers in and just tug on the left and the right, and it will kind of just naturally fold in. You could measure the seam allowance if you wanted. I don't usually, because like I said, when you tug it like this, it wants to go in at the same seam allowance where you have already sewn some of the left and the right. So I'm just putting a few clips all the way across, and I already have gray thread in, so it's going to blend perfect. If you want to switch your thread, you can. And now I'm going to stitch this lining closed by top stitching along the very edge, only about 1/8 of an inch, as close to this edge as possible. You could also close it up by hand, but I do not like doing it that way. So I'm going to take it to the machine and just stitch it closed on this side. All right, so you can see it's sewed up. It matches, like the thread matches so perfectly. It blends so nice. So now you're going to tuck this back into your bag, and you want to make sure that you're reaching inside and poking your corners out again, but this time into the lining, into our exterior. All right, fantastic. So that fits perfectly inside. So cute. That finishes up our Poppie Pouch. This is the medium size. And again, I chose to do it with like a quilted exterior without the accent piece. And this is perfect. I feel like it's a really good size for makeup, for travel, throwing it in your suitcase. And I hope you enjoy making as much as I do. Hi everyone, we just finished up our Poppie Pouch. I am absolutely in love with it. It is so cute. Thank you again to Brittany from SewFlo Sewing Patterns for allowing us to feature your pattern. I can't wait to make many more. Like I said, this is the medium size. I definitely want to try the larger size. It is such a perfect little pouch, great for markets. I think it would be great for art supplies, makeup, traveling, throwing it in your suitcase, whatever it may be. I'm just so happy with the end result, and I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Make sure you check out all the other sewists today, and I will have links below for SewFlo Sewing Patterns. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Bye.